Okay, so again, thank you in advance for joining us today. This is the Plan Princeton Community Workshop focused on sea level rise. Again, my name is Summer Burleson. I'm a senior planner with the County of San Mateo Planning and Building Department, and we have both county staff and consultants from Pathway Institutes here today to help present on the latest sea level rise projections for Princeton and to facilitate an interactive sea level rise gaming activity, which you're seeing a lot of the game on the tables. Our plan for the day is to kick off by reintroducing Plan Princeton and providing some project background and overview. Then we'll move into looking at the latest sea level rise projections for Princeton, followed by a game designed to allow you to realize the potential impacts of sea level rise and explore adaptation strategies to address risks. We planned the game to have two parts, so between part 1 and part 2, we've built in a lunch break, and we will have sandwiches and beverages at the back of the room during the lunch break for you. The county initiated Plan Princeton in 2013 and had developed a preferred plan in March of 2015, which was followed by a community open house at the Half Moon Bay Yacht Club here in Princeton to showcase the plan. The realization of the risks to Princeton due to climate-induced sea level rise halted the planning process to allow us time to research the impacts and the state guidance on sea level rise projections. This was further delayed by the pandemic. In June 2024, the state's Ocean Protection Council released its latest assessment of the estimated sea level rise projections through 2150. The data provides the county an opportunity to revisit the draft plan and determine any updates that may be needed to address the impact that rising waters may have in Princeton. And today provides an opportunity for us to gather feedback from the community, from you all, on potential impact, on the potential adaptation strategies to consider in the plan. So moving into the Plan Princeton background and overview. Is a county initiative to provide comprehensive policy, plan, and zoning amendments that will help realize the community's vision for the future of Princeton. The planning area consists of the land area from Pillar Point Harbor to the north side of the Half Moon Bay Airport, west of and including Highway 1, and including the Half Moon Bay Airport, Pillar Ridge Residential Community, and of course the community of Princeton. Plan Princeton is focused on land use regulation and policy amendments that will prioritize coastal dependent and coastal related land uses, enhance coastal access and recreation, and protect coastal resources to ensure compliance with the State Coastal Act. Benefits and amenities for the commercial fishing industry, recreational boaters, and community residents are being considered, along with addressing parking, circulation, and infrastructure needs, and ensuring community resilience to sea level rise. Upon commencement of Plan Princeton, the community gathered input from stakeholders through a series of public outreach activities and events, which fed into the development of a community vision for the future of Princeton. This was used to help understand the broad aspirations for the community and continues to be a guiding tool for us throughout the process. Recapping the key themes from this phase, we heard don't change, which was a sentiment we heard supporting very little or no new development except for safety improvements to the area. We heard a desire to preserve the existing character. This was an across-the-board desire from community members that they like and want to preserve Princeton's unique, funky, eclectic character. The community wanted to retain and enhance traits that make Princeton special and unique. We saw support to preserve and enhance the existing mix of maritime, industrial, visitor-oriented, and residential uses in the community. Shoreline erosion was a significant concern for the community, who expressed support for a managed approach to shoreline protection that ensures coastal access opportunities. We heard a high level of community support for improving access to coastal recreation in the area, and the community made clear their priority to protect coastal resources. After understanding the community's desires and priorities for Princeton, we conducted several community workshops to develop a range of alternatives with the community's feedback. And with the community's feedback, we also narrowed down those alternatives to a preferred plan for Princeton. Defining characteristics of the preferred plan includes support for continued small-scale development in the area, maintaining current land use designations except where updates are necessary or appropriate to achieve orderly land use patterns, conservation priorities, and alignment with Coastal Act priorities, a support for a mix of commercial recreation and marine industrial land uses along Princeton Avenue, including focused streetscape improvements along this visitor-focused corridor. A component to Plan Princeton, improving circulation to better meet the needs of each travel mode and each segment of the community through street design and clarifications of circulation patterns for pedestrians, bicyclists, cars, as well as truck traffic through the area. And the preferred plan supports opportunities to improve public transit and address parking inefficiencies through the use of a wayfinding signage program, not this specific one. That's just an example. The plan prioritizes protection and restoration of natural resource areas and agricultural areas, including Pillar Point Marsh and Pillar Point Bluff, and supports the need for a managed shoreline strategy that addresses coastal erosion and improves beach access with a priority for nature-based solutions, and will incorporate policy strategies to address community impacts from sea level rise. It's well documented that the erosion has had a significant effect on the Princeton shoreline. This is just visibly evident to anybody that walks along the shoreline, and you see the uneven shoreline bluff. The rise in sea level will elevate wave heights and accelerate erosion in Princeton. A component to Plan Princeton is a shoreline management plan that will use policy to ensure community resilience to the effects of sea level rise. And resilience is essentially the capacity to withstand and recover and adapt to adverse events such as sea level rise. So I'm going to just pause here for a minute before we move into looking at the actual sea level rise projections for the Princeton community to see if there's any clarifying questions that anybody has. Sure.
So with your management plan, have you dealt with the Coastal Commission yet to see how it dovetails with their recently approved sea level rise policies?
We are working with the Coastal Commission. We have been throughout the process and including with the shoreline management plan so far. So we have been checking in with them because ultimately we will need to get our plans certified by the Coastal Commission. So yeah, trying to do that early consultation with them.
Thank you.
I have a question. Can you speak to the status of the potential zoning changes? And I know you're going to talk about this at the end, so we want to hold that question. I'm just kind of curious about where that piece sits and how it relates and what else to the town and what that means considerably.
Yeah, we took through the preferred plan. We did look at what zoning updates needed to be made or should be made based on the community's input. And that was in one of the previous slides, kind of that map showing the area and with kind of the visitor serving focused land uses extending along Princeton Avenue. So that is a part of the plan. And of course, we'll need to look at that now from the lens of sea level rise. So that's kind of what this feedback will be helping us to do as a next step. And I'd be happy to look more in detail with you at kind of what is laid out in the preferred plan. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to just kind of keeping an eye on the clock. I'm going to go ahead and move into the sea level rise projection part of the presentation. But do please feel free, find me at lunchtime or after, or my contact will be on the screen at the end. That anyone's welcome to please contact me if you have any further questions about the plan overall. So we'll go ahead and jump into the sea level rise projections for Princeton. And just kind of baseline understanding for us all as to what is sea level rise. So sea level rise is an increase in sea level, which is mainly caused by thermal expansion from ocean warming and melting ice sheets and glaciers as a result of climate change. As the atmosphere warms from global warming and greenhouse gas emissions, ocean waters warm, causing water to expand and land-based ice to melt. This sort of significant long-term change in the Earth's average temperature is a cause that we know as climate change. Understanding global and regional sea level rise trends can help us to understand where local sea level rise trends are headed so we can prepare. And the trends all show that essentially sea level is accelerating. During the 20th century, global sea level rise has risen approximately 5 inches, whereas just within the past 30 years, global sea level rise has risen approximately 4 inches. The current rate of global sea level rise is triple that of the 20th century rate. Over the past century, a regional sea level rise just within California and along California's coast has risen approximately 8 inches and is expected to accelerate after 2050, after mid-century. In June of this year, the state issued its latest sea level rise projections for California under a range of 5 potential climate influence scenarios through the year 2150. This range of scenarios are primarily driven by emission rates and warming rates related to ice sheet melt. Now, which scenario will play out for us is yet to be determined. That's the uncertainty of all of this. And it's largely dependent on how well we do or how successful we are in lowering emissions that affect and influence sea level rise. Due to this uncertainty, the state recommends for land use planning, such as Plan Princeton, to evaluate the intermediate high, and high scenarios they've laid out. Again, this variation in scenarios is based on primarily driven by emissions. Using a widely accepted online modeling tool called Our Coast, Our Future, which is based on modeling outputs from the USGS, the U.S. Geological Survey. We looked at sea level rise for the Princeton area to identify what levels of rise show noticeable changes and impacts in Princeton. And so what we identified from the modeling projections are that noticeable changes in the extent of impact to Princeton will come under a 3.3, 4.9, and 6.6 feet of sea level rise, both with and without a 100-year storm. This map shows the modeling for 3.3 feet of sea level rise with and without a 100-year storm. The darker blue shading that you see is the 3.3 feet of sea level rise, and the expanded lighter blue shading is 3.3 feet with the 100-year storm. We see this scenario starting to impact the marsh area and southwest corner of Princeton along West Point Avenue, down on the right or the left side here. Recalling our range of climate scenarios, again, intermediate, high, and high, we see that 3.3 feet of sea level rise could hit Princeton within the next 45 years under a high scenario. Or Princeton may see 3.3 feet of sea level rise within the next 55 years under an intermediate high scenario. This could be, 55 years could essentially be the lifespan of a new commercial building, and certainly could be the lifespan, what's remaining of lifespans of existing buildings in the area. However, we may be able to prolong the effects of 3.3 feet of sea level rise until the end of the century, depending on emissions and how successful we are in lowering emissions and warming levels. Next noticeable change in impacts to Princeton that we see are with a 4.9 feet of sea level rise. And this map in the dark blue shows the 4.9 feet, and then the lighter blue extended area shows 4.9 feet with a 100-year storm. Again, depending on future climate conditions, Princeton may experience this higher level of sea level rise within the next 65 years or in the early part of the next century. And 6.6 feet of sea level rise with and without a 100-year storm, again, the darker blue being the 6.6 feet and the lighter extended blue area being the extent of 6.6 feet with a 100-year storm. Princeton may see the impacts of 6.6 feet by the end of this century or as late as mid-next century, again, depending on future climate conditions. So sea level is rising, but why should we care? Well, rising sea level can cause a number of impacts, physical damage, disruption in service, and can be costly, not only monetarily, but also health and safety and environmental costs to the area. Sea level rise can threaten public and critical infrastructure, public health, private development, the economy, public access. It can increase risks from other coastal processes and hazards, such as beach loss, erosion, flooding. It can also affect the groundwater table and result in saltwater intrusion to the freshwater aquifer. So we understand sea level rise is a problem and has real consequences to the community. Now the question is, how do you plan for resilience to minimize or avoid sea level rise impacts? Experts advise that the best way to plan for sea level rise and to plan for resilience to sea level rise for a community is through adaptation planning. And the development of adaptation pathways offers a community flexibility and opportunity to address sea level rise impacts over time through threshold-based actions to build resilience under the future uncertainty of climate change and sea level rise. And we have the opportunity to leverage policy updates through Plan Princeton to plan alternatives for Princeton's future in the face of sea level rise. In adaptation planning, there are 3 general strategies: protect, accommodate, and realign. Good comprehensive planning includes all 3 strategies. You'll learn more about these strategies later in the game, so I'm not going to dive into them. However, protection strategies defend development in place without changes to development. Accommodation strategies involve modifying existing development or incorporating design and construction methods into new development to reduce hazard risks. And realignment strategies can include relocating and removing existing development from hazard areas and limiting new development in vulnerable areas. Now, the Harbor District has had success in implementing protection strategies in Pillar Point Harbor, which is showcased by the West Trail Living Shoreline, which was completed, I think, in 2022. The district is also anticipating an upcoming partnership with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to examine Princeton shoreline protection strategies. And we're working closely with the Harbor District, and they're working closely with us throughout their efforts and throughout our efforts with Plan Princeton. Where the county sees that we can help balance efforts, though, is through developing land use policy focused on accommodation and realignment strategies. However, for the purpose of the gaming activity today, you're going to be introduced and working with all 3 strategies. So with today's gameplay, your table is going to become a community. And you'll work together through a series of steps to determine community assets and their vulnerability to sea level rise. Now, community assets are things that are important to the quality of life and the functioning of a community. Your community will identify the level of exposure of your assets to sea level rise. Then your community will determine the sensitivity level of your assets based on the degree they will be affected by sea level rise impacts. And you'll discuss the consequences of sea level rise in the context of adaptive capacity, or the ability for your assets to evolve or cope with the sea level rise impacts. Once you understand your assets' level of vulnerability to sea level rise, your community will work together to explore and select adaptation strategies to protect your assets from sea level rise. So we hope that you find the game fun and enjoyable. It will be challenging. There are costs, just like in real life. There's costs to every decision you make, and you will see that throughout the game. And that, I think we're going to get into the first part of the game before we have lunch. And so I'll turn it over to Claire Bonham Carter with Pathways Institute to lead us through the game of floods.